Hello, this is Heartstock Radio. I'm your host, Carol Murphy. Clark Grant is in the studio. This week, our guest is Mike Newman. In just a moment, Mike will be with us to tell us what he is up to at Returnity. Also, remember that we are on Facebook, and you can also email us at heartstockradio@gmail.com. And in just a moment, Mike will be with us. This is Heartstock. Thanks for listening.
This land was made for you and me. As I went walking that Ribbon Highway, I saw above me.
This is Heartstock Radio, and I'm your host, Carol Murphy. Today, our guest is Mike Newman. He is the founder of Returnity. Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with our listeners. Can you give us a little intro here? What is Returnity and what is it that you're doing there?
Returnity makes reusable shipping and delivery packaging. We replace single-use cardboard boxes and poly mailer bags that we all are getting so many of these days with something that's lighter on the planet, more environmentally friendly, and just a better customer experience.
And when you decided to found Returnity, what were some of the things that motivated you to do this with your life?
Well, I've been working on environmental issues for my whole career, but as often happens with business, the motivation can come from unusual places. So with Returnity, it actually was a request from a customer. You know, the used clothing reseller ThredUp that a lot of people are familiar with now. They were buying reusable shopping bags from the predecessor company, and the founder of ThredUp, James Reinhart, said, "Boy, I'm buying these reusable shopping bags. Any chance you could make me a reusable shipping bag?" And it was just that one simple little request, that spark, which started us down this road. And here we are 3.5 years later, thanks to that little spark of motivation. So, the general idea of thinking about reuse and waste and bags was there, but the idea to get into shipping packaging, really, the credit has to go to James, and we're all really thankful for that moment.
And what was your professional career like before you decided to found the company?
I have an environmental policy background, so that's what I studied in college, and I went straight to Washington from there, and mostly working for the Sierra Club, the big environmental grassroots organization. And after 5 years of working for the Sierra Club and working with Congress on environmental issues, I was, at the time, I was kind of sick of getting beat by large corporations in the halls of Congress and seeing our issues not treated with the level of focus that I thought that, they deserved and the planet deserved. And so I thought, well, if I can't beat them, I got to learn what's making them tick. And I left to get an MBA and better understand things from the corporate side. And what I've tried to do since then is really blend those two things together. So take that grounding that I have in environmental policy and grassroots work and combine it with what I learned about how to build and run businesses and try and find the best of both worlds. And Returnity has been an exciting platform for that, where we're building a successful business where we can make money and reward investors, but more importantly, we're having a real impact on the environment and replacing something that is wasteful with something that can be lighter on the planet and also grow as the amount of shipping it grows so quickly. So it's been an exciting way to kind of bring those interests and skills together.
Yeah, and I don't want to drift off too far astray here, but I think given the current events that are occurring in our government, it might be worth touching upon why were you getting beat, as you put it. What exactly are you saying that business runs government, big business runs government, and that's who was beating you?
Well, I think that it's probably no surprise that, money makes the world go round in many respects. And certainly the lobbying budgets of major corporations was significantly higher than what a grassroots group like the Sierra Club could bring to the table. And elected officials, always were wondering where their next ad buy and their election would be. But, I do think it's more than that. I think that the economy and jobs and making sure people have a livelihood is a critical, purpose for government. And businesses are very effective at sending the message that they need to have the ability to create and sustain jobs for people. And government, elected officials are always going to be very sensitive to that, as they should be. And I think part of what's improved over the last 20 years is the ability to show that sustainability and the economy are not at odds with each other, that in fact you can improve the economy and improve employment opportunities for citizens by protecting the planet and by investing in green tech and new solutions, rather than just sort of relying on oil and gas and the sort of the past. And so a big part of it, I think, is money, but I think another part of it is understanding how the economy and the environment intersect and how to better tell that story. And I think, we're seeing the benefits of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Was there something early in life that influenced you to go into environmental work?
I've always been someone who loved the outdoors, but I think the thing that sort of crystallized it for me was in high school. I had this really sort of, in retrospect, important moment. At the time, I had no idea, but of course, looking back on it, you sort of see how formative it was. So at my high school, I happened to have back-to-back classes one year of science and then gym. And at the time, there was a piece of land that was adjacent to my high school that the high school wanted to, it was natural, it was like a prairie, and they wanted to turn it into an athletic field. And so I would go to my science class, and the science teacher, who happened to be leading the effort to protect that land, to keep it protected, would go on and on about the benefits and the challenges of that. And then I would go straight to gym, and the athletic director would go on and on about how important it was to tear it up and make a ball field out of it. And, that moment I found myself, even though I was an athlete and I played sports, I was way more sympathetic to the science teacher than the athletic director. And that kind of got me excited and active and motivated. And in retrospect, that seemed like one of those important times in life where you realized you could make choices, you realized you could have a voice, you could be active. And, if it wasn't for that happenstance of those bookended classes and that moment with that ball field, who knows? But that was a moment that, I keep coming back to and realize was kind of a turning point and kind of what excited and motivated me.
As that young student, why was it that you thought the science teacher was on the right side?
Boy, yeah, that's a good question. I think that it was probably because the school, which had a really profound track, it was a very successful school in Michigan where I grew up athletically, but it had a lot of fields, a lot of ball fields already. There was a number of football fields, baseball, soccer, everything. It really had quite the athletic campus. And, as I said, I grew up going to camp and being outdoors and really valuing natural spaces with my family. And I think that it just seemed hollow to me. Like, this push to just tear one more, piece of land up seemed, it just felt like it at the time. Yeah, I don't know if I can give it more motivation. It just sort of felt like this was short-term thinking, and that was just how my brain was wired, I guess, like to sort of feel sympathy for the environment and to recognize the need for balance.
That's a good word, balance, which I think is a good intro into the next question, which is kind of the overreaching mission of your company. I mean, this has to do with circularity, and is it also linked to plastics?
It is, although, it wasn't the motivation behind it, but it's been interesting and exciting, frankly, to see so much attention now to plastics and the impact of plastics and the opportunity to move past particularly moving past single-use plastics. And I think for us and for me personally, there's always a risk of what I call sustainability magic thinking. So, this appreciation of the impact of plastics in particular and waste, and of course, pulling back more the climate, and just wanting to do something that's better for the planet. But there's a big gap between wanting to do something that's better for the planet and finding scalable, sort of cost-effective solutions that can accomplish that. And so, this push away from single-use plastics, which I think is so important, also creates some danger, because if you're not replacing single-use plastics with products that are scalable from a cost standpoint and operationally and so forth, you're not ultimately going to solve the problem. You're just transferring it somewhere else. And so, a lot of what we work on, I think, is trying to find the right path through all those conflicting challenges. Is how do we recognize how damaging so many aspects of our consumer culture have become, and where there's really profound waste, and create solutions that can be scaled, where customers will not have to pay more than they're willing to, where companies can afford to implement them, where they can be efficient operationally and so forth. And single-use plastics are really good at being cheap and easy to operate, and so replacing them is hard. But we're excited about the directions that we and others have been able to take to start to really fix that problem.
And you mentioned ThredUp earlier. Who are your partners? I would imagine that ranges from suppliers, manufacturers, users.
Yeah, we work hand in hand with brands, companies directly. And so what we'll do is understand where what their operations are today and what their interests are in moving forward. I call it our 3P framework, which is process, participation, and packaging, which is kind of reflecting that sort of systems way of thinking about packaging. So even, when you order something online, it shows up at your doorstep in cardboard or a poly mailer bag. You might think of packaging as just being that bag or box, but it's really about a system. How is it being shipped to you? Where is it being packed? What are you as the consumer supposed to do with it? Can you recycle it locally? Are you just throwing it in the garbage? What's the process for doing that? And if you don't think about that whole system when redesigning packaging for clients, it's not really going to work. So our customers are ultimately the companies who are shipping you your products that you order, but it's always the broader ecosystem of the company and whoever they're shipping with, whatever, the postal service or whomever, and your local municipality and what is their infrastructure. And so we end up working with this really broad brush group of stakeholders to replace something that seems so simple as just a cardboard box or a poly bag.
And where are you at with your company? When did you launch?
Well, we've been doing this for 3.5 years now. And we, the first few years were a lot of trial and error and trying to figure out what would work and what wouldn't. And then the start of last year was at the end of 2019 and into 2020 was when we really started to see a lot of growth, which was obviously exciting for us as a company, but also I think reflected where new markets and new innovations were coming. And a lot of our customers at that time particularly were the sort of new rental economy. So Rent the Runway might be the company that most people are familiar with, but there's a lot of companies that have sprung up around renting you products, particularly clothing, instead of buying it outright. And those were sort of the perfect first group of customers for us, because they would ship you your rental clothing and then you'd ship it back in the same bag or box, and then they could just use it over and over again. And that first wave of clients allowed us to start, by last year, we're already replacing millions of shipments a year in single-use packaging. And then we've, both because of the pandemic, and also as we've, been able to innovate and look more broadly, we've started to move into other use cases. But that first group of clothing rental and other kind of rental economy companies is where reusables started to really shine.
Mm-hmm. We're at that midway point. We're going to take a quick music break, and we shall be right back with Mike Newman. This is Heartstock. Welcome back to Heartstock Radio. I'm your host, Carol Murphy. And today our guest is Mike Newman. Hi again, Mike.
Hello.
So tell us a little bit about the materials that your reusable packaging is made from and how that all evolved.
Well, we say we're material agnostic, which means we kind of come into each project with an open mind. But, mostly we sort of historically, I guess I could say, settled around a few sort of basic materials, in particular, recycled poly fabric. So it's plastic. It's a plastic fabric. It's made from recycled bottles, like water bottles. And it has a lot of advantages for packaging. It's light, it's durable, it's waterproof, it's recyclable again into that same material. So you can keep it in a closed loop format. And that's been really effective for shipping packaging. Now, what's been really exciting for us is we've been able to start exploring new materials and new ways of doing that of late for a number of clients. And so one thing we're doing now is working with a major sort of outdoor gear fabric manufacturer to start using their waste fabrics that they would have otherwise landfilled, that they weren't able to use in clothing or tents. And so we're piloting making packaging from that. We've got our first customers going live using a natural fiber fabric. So instead of using plastic fabric, using natural fibers. And that's really, exciting for us as we try and move past the, plastic economy. But every bag or box we make is unique because, if you think about it, every bag or box you tend to get is unique as well. It needs to be the right size. It has to have the right protection for whatever goods are coming to your doorstep. And, as I said earlier, packaging seems sort of straightforward and simple, but in actuality, there's a lot of complexity behind it to make sure it's easy, cheap, light, strong, et cetera. And so, from a material and design standpoint, that does mean we kind of take our toolkit and think about each project uniquely based on what the client requires.
Let's talk a little bit about the customer who's getting the product from the company that you're working with. What is that customer experience like? And what were some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, this is really where these programs can succeed or fail. And so as much as its consumers complain about packaging and, it's a real, I call it the best cocktail party company I've ever been a part of, because when you tell people you're working on replacing delivery packaging with something more sustainable, people get really excited because they're really tired of how much packaging they have to deal with. Not just, how visible a problem it is as far as environmental impact, but also it's a pain. You got to break all those boxes down and find a place to store them and put them out to recycle. And, it really is a part of your day that you would be happy to get rid of. But the flip side of that, of course, is that as much of a pain as it is for consumers, you have to create an alternative that is as simple and easy as possible. And that creates its own challenges. So, even when so if it's a rental, let's say you're renting something and it's shipped to you in a bag or box and you were going to send it back anyways, that means that experience is going to be almost identical with reusable packaging. But if it's something you would have otherwise just kept and disposed of the packaging locally, making sure the customer understands the difference, knows what they need to do, and then follows through and sends that empty shipping bag or box back, turns out to be kind of the central question. And, consumers, I think, are much more sensitive today to environmental issues and the need to be more circular in how we consume resources. And they're certainly motivated, but even with all that, you still will have 30% or more of consumers who won't send back empty packaging. And if you think about it, that creates its own environmental problems. So, reusables are more resource intensive. So if consumers then just throw it in the garbage anyways, you've created a different problem. So as simple as the solutions can be at a high level, the devil is definitely in those little details, and making sure it's all done just right is really important.
How do you motivate customers or your clients' customers not to throw it in the garbage?
Yeah, I know. Well, I think that, our view is to, I say, let's not boil the ocean. So, companies reach out to us all the time because that is the most visual part of their business. If they're an e-commerce business, is that packaging that their products show up in. But I tell them, let's start with the places where we know this can work now. So for example, for shoe or clothing companies, a significant percentage of their orders are going to be customers who buy two sizes of the same product because they just want to test, try them on and see which one fits better. That's a great use case for reusables. You already know that you're getting at least one of them back, right? I tried the size 10 and the 11. The 11 fits better. I'm sending back the 10. Perfect. Put in the reusable. It's coming back. But for a customer who's just buying a pair of socks or something, to try and get that customer to send it back is going to be hard, because they're not going to be as motivated or think about it as much. So I think that the key is to align with how consumers already behave and to try and change as little about their behavior as possible today. And then as they get used to this and as it becomes more common, it gets easier. And so for us, it's about phasing it in with use cases where we know it can be successful and tackling the hardest problems later.
Do you have any stats for us as far as, this kind of ties into what you touched on before too, is the whole increase in e-commerce due to COVID. Can you give us some stats?
It's really incredible. I mean, there were over 100 billion parcel deliveries globally last year. That number is expected to double to over 200 billion within the next 5 years. And just to, from the U.S. standpoint, it's enough packaging to pave a mile-wide cardboard road from New York to L.A. every single year. The other statistic I use is we're now using enough packaging here in the United States to actually box the Empire State Building every 20 seconds. So it is an incredible amount of packaging, and it's only growing and growing quickly. And consumers obviously were enjoying the convenience of having things directly delivered to their home before the pandemic. And now the whole safety factor has increased it. So, this is a challenge for everybody, for government, for companies, for consumers, that is only going to get more profound, not less.
And I also noticed on your website that you're participating in the National Geographic Ocean Plastic Initiative Challenge. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was one of the last sort of pre-pandemic able to do something in person things, was to be able to be in Washington for the finals of that challenge, where they brought in innovative companies from around the world who were tackling the real problem of plastic waste and how it eventually makes its way into oceans. And so what they did is they partnered with a number of companies, and they put out a call for innovations that were tackling single-use plastics and ways to keep it out of the ocean. So we were one of the finalists. We were actually won second place, which was really a great honor. And really, I think it reflects this larger awareness and investment that you're seeing from companies who appreciate that they need to be thinking differently about how they consume goods and how they move products to consumers and how they empower their customers to take action in sustainable ways. And there's this growing list of companies who have made public 2025 pronouncements that they will no longer use single-use packaging that's not, it has to be 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable by 2025. And that's a real change and a real challenge. They don't know how they're going to do it necessarily yet because not everything is ready. or is been innovated yet. But to put, these sorts of challenges, these sorts of opportunities, I think reflect where, consumers should see this stuff moving towards, and where companies are really investing with money and commitment to help make that happen.
What was your second place prize?
We got it was money, which is very helpful for young companies, and recognition, and the ability to work with some really innovative large companies, and also, just to be there and sort of, meet all these innovators from around the world and learn about what they're working on, was just really inspiring and exciting, and part of, in those early days of young companies when you're pushing hard to make the thing work, to have those sorts of pause points, to get inspired and see the bigger picture is always really, really helpful.
And we've probably got 4 minutes left here, and I'm hoping that you can share with us what your plans are for the future. You mentioned using non-plastic natural materials. Maybe you can share a little bit more about what lies ahead.
Absolutely. I think the big change that we are working on, and not alone, is the ability to use local infrastructure to facilitate reuse. And what I mean by that is, consumers might be getting familiar already with buying things online and then bringing it back to a store or a local drop point for a return. So let's say they didn't like the size or the fit, and they can return that item to a local drop point, even if it's not the same store, rather than having to print out a mailing label and ship it back one at a time. And that's something that the e-commerce world has been working on for a few years now, to create efficiency and make it easier for consumers. What I'm excited about for us this year, and others are doing it as well, is to start to leverage that same type of network for you to return the packaging as well. So, rather than just relying on curbside recycling, which is always going to be hard, you're going to see this kind of infrastructure continue to grow, and in these sort of circular systems that are really easy for you as a consumer to use, to get your products, not just the product itself, but the packaging back to the retailer, to that starting point, so it can be either recycled or reused correctly. These sort of innovations, I think, are going to really start to accelerate, and it's an exciting part of our plans for this year and beyond.
And how might our listeners find you and carry on this conversation if they wish, or to, if you're a company and you'd like to use reusables, how can folks reach you?
Our website is just returnity.co. So it's returnity.co. We're always talking about what we're working on there, and would love for people to see what we're up to.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for being on Heartstock, and thanks for the work you're doing. This is exciting.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. This is Heartstock Radio, and we will be back next week with yet another wonderful guest. Peace.
Heartstock Radio is a production of KBMF 102.5 Butte America Radio. Hear our programs every Friday at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time via live stream at butteamericaradio.org.
As I went walking, I saw a sign there, and on the sign